Have you ever looked at a dense forest or crowded pond and wondered how millions of organisms share the exact same system without collapsing the system? The answer starts with what we call a habitat. A habitat is a highly specific set of life-supporting conditions, like temperature, moisture, and shelter, that allow certain species to survive and reproduce. This diagram breaks down a typical landscape into its two foundational pillars. On one side, you have the biotic components, which are all the living organisms, like plants, animals, and microbes. On the other side are the abiotic components, non-living physical elements like sunlight, water, and soil minerals. Look at how a single plant operates. It pulls non-living resources from the environment to grow, fueling the food supply for the living animals above it. A habitat operates as a tightly integrated machine, where life and non-life are locked in constant, necessary interaction. When a group of the exact same species lives together in that machine, we call it a population, but a habitat rarely holds just one. When multiple different populations share the same space, they form a community. To avoid burning through the environment's limited resources, these populations adopt distinct roles. A hawk hunts during the day, while an owl hunts at night. They divide the space and the schedule, ensuring the environment can support them both. But what happens if you remove just one seemingly minor population from this arrangement, say a specific type of pollinating insect? The unpollinated plants fail to reproduce, the herbivores that eat them starve, and predators lose their prey. Survival relies entirely on the invisible web of relationships holding the entire community together. The rules governing those relationships are strictly economic, built on the currency of energy. A food chain maps the direct, linear transfer of that energy from a producer, like grass, up to a predator, like a fox. But real ecosystems rely on complex, overlapping networks to stay stable. This visualization maps out a food web, showing how a single chain expands into a multinodal network where most animals rely on several different food sources. Ecologists divide this web into trophic levels. A trophic level is a specific tier of energy transfer, separating the plant producers at the bottom from the various levels of animal consumers stacked above them. If we stack those tiers, we get an ecological pyramid. This chart shows a massive base of producers supporting a shrinking tier of herbivores, all the way up to a tiny apex. At every upward step, roughly 90% of the available energy is lost as heat or used for basic survival. By the time energy reaches the top predators, only a tiny fraction of a percent remains. That is why apex predators are extremely rare, and why they require massive amounts of lower-level biomass just to sustain a small population. Energy limitations dictate the exact structure and population limits of any ecosystem. With all this energy moving upward and organisms constantly dying, a massive amount of dead organic matter is left behind. Nature solves this with decomposers, or saprotrophs, like the fungi breaking down this forest floor. A saprotroph feeds on non-living organic matter, digesting it externally to absorb the nutrients. This flowchart traces the path of that decomposition. It shows how decomposers break down complex waste and release vital nutrients back into the soil as a dark organic material called humus, which is then absorbed by the roots of a new producer. Through this continuous recycling, a healthy natural ecosystem operates in a perfectly closed loop, generating zero true waste. Without the destructive force of decomposition, the entire generative engine of life would run out of raw materials and stall completely. When human activity enters this equation, the mathematics of the ecosystem are tested. Practices like deforestation and chemical pollution directly sever the connections between biotic and abiotic components. When a habitat shrinks, the animals inside it lose their food and water sources. They are forced to push outward, leading to displaced wildlife wandering directly into human settlements and infrastructure. The impact can also be entirely invisible. Consider the Indian vulture crisis, where a single human chemical unraveled an entire food web. Farmers began treating their cattle with diclofenac, an anti-inflammatory drug. When those cattle died, scavenger vultures ate the remains. The drug was highly toxic to the birds, leading to a massive die-off. Without vultures cleaning the environment, rotting carcasses piled up, spreading disease rapidly through local communities. Because ecosystems are tightly woven webs, A localized human action inevitably triggers systemic, far-reaching consequences. But that same understanding of ecological mechanics gives us exact blueprints to repair the damage. We can build structural solutions, like ecological corridors, strips of natural habitat connecting fragmented populations, allowing wildlife to safely cross human infrastructure. We can also implement economic solutions, like sustainable agriculture. This relies on natural pest control and maintaining soil health with organic compost, rather than flooding the environment with chemical inputs that disrupt local food webs. Next time you look at a forest, park, or pond, look past the scenery. Recognize them as complex, dynamic machines requiring our respect. By understanding the architecture of harmony, we can transition from threats to becoming their ultimate protectors.